So you decided you're making a small and fun game that'll take around, let's say, 1 to 3 months to make, but then it actually takes a whole year to finish it. That's the story of how this game is made. What is going on, everybody? My name is Smab and welcome to this video. Today I'll cover 1 year of game development from the beginning of making First Underground all the way to finally beating the game myself. I'll cover how this became this, how this became this, and how this became this. Well, I won't actually cover that last one, although I now already kinda covered it. Whatever. So for that, we'll need to go all the way back to February 2022, when my dad told me I should start making a small and fun game. He told me that already before, but for some reason on February 25th I thought it was a good idea to actually do it. So I started making the game, or whatever it was supposed to be back then. I used Unity to make this game because that's my favorite game engine. The idea for the game was Flappy Bird, but in 4 different directions. So instead of only flapping upwards, you could also flap to the left, to the right and downwards as well. Quick interruption. Let me thank Unity for their visual scripting. Because if visual scripting wouldn't be a thing in Unity, I would probably still be stuck drawing sketches of levels on paper. But that's a story for another time. So I used visual scripting to make this whole game. I didn't write one single line of code, with an exception of about 10 lines of code to get one of Unity's services working. Anyways, Unity has this function in its physics engine, or whatever it's called, which adds the so-called force to an object when something happens. In my case, that's when a player hits one of the arrow keys. This type of movement also allows to speed up your movement, which made this game speedrunnable, if that's a word. Because it would be a speedrunnable game, it needed more than just being able to move this ball around. So I needed to come up with some juice for the game. And that's when the game started to get its shape. I added a lot of different things into the game that basically changed the game from yet another Flappy Bird game to something completely else. So the first things I added were 2 mechanics. One was shooting arrows and the other one was changing the color of the ball to orange or pink to pass these color walls. I also added a lot of obstacles, such as simple things like an object that just damages the player, but also things like an enemy that shoots a bullet that's pointed at a player, and when that bullet gets hit by either the player's arrow or by a wall, it divides itself into 4 small bullets that each go in one diagonal direction. In the meantime, I also made some UI and the level system. I decided to let the game take place in some kind of underground, which I used to title the game to Force Underground. Force stands for the type of movement this game uses, and Underground stands for, like I just said, the place this game takes place in. The logo of the game is the Japanese letter FU, and I choose FU because that then stands for Force Underground. But those things aren't the only things I did in the meantime. No, I was also considering something big.
Boss battles.
Should I add them into the game? Well, the obvious answer is yes, of course. I mean, I'm a big boss battle fan myself. When I started making the bosses, I already decided the game would be divided in 5 sections, which I later called chapters, with each chapter introducing a couple of new obstacles. After I made the boss battles, I started on making the sprites and animating them, since I only had made the bones for everything in the game until that point. Which, by the way, is the point that 3 months already had passed, and I didn't really thought of the game as a small game anymore. After I made the visuals for the game, I made the main menu including the logo for the game. And after I made the logo, I started on the audio. I made all the sound effects with my voice. So for example, this is what I recorded. And this is what it became after editing it. When I finished making the sound effects, I made the music for the game. At that point, I already had made the entire game. Or so you would think. I actually didn't make any stage yet. So let me quickly explain how the level system in Force Underground works. Like I said, there are 5 sections. Each section consists of 10 levels, with the last level always being the same boss for that particular section. The other 9 levels on the other hand aren't always the same stages. Each section has 30 different stages you can encounter in its 9 levels. So 5 sections with 30 stages each makes 150 stages in total, excluding the 5 boss stages, that is. Making the stages was exhausting and very time consuming. Little did I know back then how time consuming but also how important that part of the game would be. But hold your horses, I'll cover that in a minute. After I made the stages and tweaked everything a little bit, I could start working on the last parts of the game, adding a pause menu, adding different balls to unlock, and a lot more. The last couple of days I made a header art for the game, recorded footage for my game, and did stuff like setting up the itch.io page. And then, on August 17th, I finally launched the game. But Smab, the time between February and August is a year. That's right, launching the game in the state it was at that point was a mistake. The game was just way too hard and unbeatable. Before we continue the second period of Force Underground game's development, I want to let you know I haven't recorded anything of this period because I initially thought I wouldn't update the game at all at the time of launching the game, which was also a mistake. Another thing I want to tell you guys is that I just turned 16 years old a couple of weeks ago. So if you like this video up to this point, make sure to leave a like. So how did the second period went down? The game got 8 updates after I launched it. Earlier in the video I said, little did I know back then how time consuming but also how important that part of the game would be. The stages in this game really decide if the game is fun or not and if it's beatable or not. In 7 out of the 8 updates I made stage balance updates. Most of the time I made the stages slightly easier, but sometimes I also made some of them harder. It was super unbalanced in the first version. But there were actually more things unbalanced. Some updates also included boss balance updates, enemies balance updates, and obstacle balance updates, with obstacle referring to the objects that damages the player. But besides balancing the game, the updates got a lot of things that made the game both more fun and beatable. And there were of course a lot of bug fixes as well, but covering those would make this video 2 hours long and we want to avoid that. The first 4 updates didn't come with any really game-changing features. I mean, in the 4th update I did manage to make a program that checks if I update the game, and if I did, it would give the player an in-game notification. So that's pretty cool, I guess. But let's talk about the 5th update. When I launched version 1.5.0, I actually thought it would be the last big update. Next to balances, I also made a training mode where the player could change some settings and then play the game without collecting coins, unlocking balls or fighting bosses. This way the player could kind of beat the game. I also added 5 more unlockable balls and redesigned the main menu for the first time. However, something still felt wrong. I mean, yeah, the player kind of beats the game with training mode, but it wasn't what I was looking for. So I came up with an idea that in the end was the actual solution. The chapter selection menu. With this, players would be able to skip chapters, but it should need a requirement and a cost if the player wanted to do that. The requirement was to beat the boss of the chapter 5 times to be able to skip that chapter. This way the player would at least have beaten the boss 5 times and would also have at least survived the whole chapter 5 times. I still needed to come up with a cost though. I couldn't really come up with anything except for time loss, since I made the game speedrunnable. So I played training mode and looked at how long each chapter lasted on average, and I came up with good costs for each chapter. But with this feature, the game still wasn't beatable. After I released version 1.7.0, which by the way also didn't have any game-changing features, I sat down. And I thought, the next update will be the final update, and it will be big. And it will make the game finally beatable. I also realized that the versions all the way up to 1.7.0 should actually have been alpha and beta versions, but then again, I initially thought I wouldn't even update the game. So the last update, version 2.0.0, didn't actually got any big game-changing features either, but it did make the game beatable. I didn't release it until I had balanced the game to the point that I beated the game myself at least once. The update had next to the balance updates also some other cool stuff. I made some balls look better, changed some balls unlock requirements, redesigned the main menu to its final design, and more and more and more. But the most important things I added to the final version was the bestiary. You might think it's not a really big addition or anything, but it was for me, and that's because the bestiary was the last thing left I had considered adding to the game during its development. Even before I launched the first version, I considered adding it. I mean, I gave all the enemies names, but their names actually weren't mentioned in the game at all, unlike the boss's names that appear when you enter the boss stage. So with the bestiary in the game, I really didn't have anything left I wanted to add to the game, and that made the game, of course with the final balance updates, truly finished. I made the new header art for the game and made the new trailer for the game, and with that, on March 1st, 2023, I finally released the beatable, fun, in my opinion, and final version of Force Underground. That's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like this video, and if you want to see more like this, then consider subscribing. I would really appreciate that. You could also ring that thick bell next to the subscribe button to get notified whenever I post a new video or do something else on my YouTube channel. See you guys next time. Bye.